Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Sea of Tranquility's Artist Retrospective Series. I'm your host, Pete Pardo, publisher and CEO of SOT. Today, we've got a show based on a Canadian band that you guys have asked for. I am talking about Triumph, okay, the band that started in 1975, put together by Mike Levine on bass and keyboards, Gil Moore on drums and vocals, and of course Rick Emmett on guitar and vocals. So here you had a trio. You know, you could kind of say that they followed in the mold of Rush, who came out a few years before them as a kind of like a power trio from Canada with some slightly progressive leanings, right? But I think Triumph were always more of kind of like an arena rock band than Rush, who had all sorts of, interest in more progressive music and sci-fi lyrics and that sort of thing. But Triumph were always a little bit more accessible, at least, especially early on, but even throughout the 80s. And they were a band who actually did very, very well for themselves, had a lot of best-selling tours and albums through the years, but kind of fizzled out by the end of the 80s and into the early 90s. So we're going to take a look at kind of like the discography and the recorded career of Triumph, a band that I've always liked quite a bit. I've actually had the opportunity to see them numerous times throughout the 80s, and I look back on those concerts very, very fondly. So let's go over to 1976. So the band gets together in 75, they record a bunch of tunes, and they release an album which originally was a self-titled album, but later CD reissues titled it In the Beginning. Okay, that's the remastered CD from a few years back right there. So here, you've got some of those early Triumph staples like 24 Hours a Day. What else we got here? Be My Lover, Don't Take My Life, Blinding Light Show, and Moonchild, which is probably like the centerpiece of this album and the songs that most people really remember. That's a pretty progressive tune, really good track. And kind of what set Triumph apart from some other bands is that they had this great dual vocal attack. So Gil Moore and Rick Emmett, whose voices sounded completely different. You could totally tell them apart, but it added some really nice variety to their music, which was really good, crisp, melodic hard rock. They were always kind of lumped in as a metal band. I've never really classified Triumph as pure heavy metal, although they did have their moments. But just a really good heavy rock band with some great guitar work by Rick Emmett, who is one of the most underrated players of the day. So jump ahead a year, and probably of the early era, the album that really kind of started to jumpstart their career. I'm talking about Rock and Roll Machine. Okay, depending on where you lived, you might have had a different album cover for your release. I know here in the U.S., when this album came out, it had like a live picture of the band on the front. This, I believe, was the Canadian album cover. Okay, so here you've got some other early staples of the Triumph repertoire, like Takes Time, Bring It On Home. What else we got here? New York City Streets, which was like a two-parter. And then, the Rocky Mountain Way, okay, which was a cover of a Joe Walsh tune. The title track, Rock and Roll Machines, a longer tune, somewhat progressive with a nice extended Rick Emmett guitar solo in there. What else we got here? We got the little suite called The City, which includes War March, El Duende Agaziante, and Minstrel's Lament. A very solid album, again, that kind of really shows off the musical skills of the band in more of somewhat of a progressive light as opposed to some of the more commercial waters that they would go into a few years later. So to kind of round out the 70s, the band comes out with this really, really solid album that has a lot of really, really great tracks that would kind of follow them throughout their career. Just a Game. That really cool artwork there. Here you've got Moving On, Lay It On the Line, their first really big break into the FM radio market, okay? And probably for a lot of people, their favorite song from the band. What else we got here? American Girls, good kind of like hard rock and boogie. Just a Game, the title track, really good melodic hard rock. Hold On, another long-standing popular tune, very melodic with some great lead vocals by Emmett. and Suitcase Blues. So, most of these early Triumph albums are actually pretty short, barely over a half hour, 35 minutes long. But this is probably, of the three we just mentioned, this is the most realized Triumph that we would then come to see for years on. A really, really solid album that they kind of helped close out the 70s with. And that led to Progressions of Power, okay, which came out 1 year later, 1980. Here we got some more really standout tunes. I Live for the Weekend, barnstorming kickoff track with a great Gilmour vocal and some killer guitar solos from Emmett. I Can Survive, In the Night, Nature's Child, Woman in Love, Take My Heart, Tear the Roof Off, another great rockin' tune. Hard Road, kind of bluesy tune. Not as strong as of an album as Just a Game, in my opinion, but some really good tunes on here. And this would kind of lead into what most folks agree is the band's strongest album. Okay, this was the album that really kind of grabbed me as a fan, and that's 1981's Allied Forces. In fact, I was lucky enough to go see them on this tour. They played at the Palladium in New York City with guest opener Saxon. Saxon's first appearance on these shores in North America. This one, pretty much top to bottom, is just a killer album. You've got Fool for Your Love, really good bluesy heavy rocker with some really cool Gilmour vocals. Of course, Magic Power, probably the next tune for the band that kind of took over or took off from them on FM radio. Really good, memorable, catchy tune with a great Emmett vocal. Air Raid, a little bit of an instrumental. Allied Forces, the title track, probably as close to metal as these guys got, and a great live track, one of their enduring songs live on stage. Then we got Hot Time in the City Tonight, Fight the Good Fight, another memorable song for the band. Probably my personal favorite on here, and just a incredibly memorable melodic tune with a great chorus, great guitar riffs, great Emmett vocals. Ordinary Man, kind of a heavy bluesy rock tune, a little interlude from Emmett on guitar, and then Say Goodbye, again another really memorable kind of ballady tune, but just a really melodic hard rocker. So, top to bottom, really strong, easily the best album in the Triumph discography. So they would follow that up with a year later. As you can tell, they're basically pumping out albums almost every single year. That's the kind of role that they were on. So next we got Never Surrender. By now they realized that they were really clicking in America. So most of the albums that kind of are following were really geared towards the American public. So, MTV was just starting. They were starting to do videos, a lot of big tours. They started doing the big arena shows. I actually saw them in a lot of big, larger halls and arenas, like kind of hockey, what they call hockey arenas or basketball arenas. Not quite stadium level, but, just, below that 15 to 20,000 seaters. So here we got Too Much Thinking, A World of Fantasy, another FM radio hit for the band. A Minor Prelude, All the Way, Battle Cry, Overture, Procession, a lot of little instrumental kind of things here. Never Surrender, the title track, another really good memorable tune that they played live quite a bit. When the Lights Go Down, a barnstorming Gilmour sung heavy rocker, like that one a lot. In fact, I believe they played that one live. Writing on the Wall, and a little epilogue to end it out. So a very solid album. Maybe not quite as strong as this, but not too far behind. Really good. Okay, so then we're going to jump ahead 2 years to 84. Okay, so a little bit of a break. The reason for the break is because the band was doing a ton of touring at this time. We've got the Thunder 7 album. Okay. So here, some more strong tunes. Again, a nice run of releases here for the band that really saw them selling a lot of albums here in the U.S., a lot of sold-out tours. So Spellbound, Rock and Roll On, Cool Down, Follow Your Heart, that was the big hit from this album. A great tune that saw dual lead vocals from both Moore and Emmett, which was really cool to see. Very cool tune. Time Goes By, Midsummer's Daydream, a little instrumental. Time Cannon, Killin' Time, Stranger in a Strange Land, and Little Boy Blues, another instrumental to end it. Here's where we kind of see the little bit of a slide in quality. A solid album, but nowhere near, for my money, the quality of the 2 albums, 3 albums actually, or 4 albums that came before it. Though a solid album, some really good tunes, but overall, top to bottom, not quite up to the standards there. And that would kind of continue. So now we go ahead 2 more years to A Sport of Kings. Again, they're taking a little bit longer in between recording albums because they're trying to make these, really commercial, really layered. But again, they're doing a lot of touring. So here we've got Tears in the Rain, another very commercial. Okay, keyboards from Moore, a lot of hooks, very cool tune. Pretty sure they did a video for this. Again, it was one of their kind of like MTV and FM radio hits at the time. Somebody's Out There. Another really good tune, but aimed squarely at album-oriented rock radio. Okay, and an enduring hit for them that they played live. Actually, a really cool tune. Great vocals by Emmett, really catchy. What Rules My Heart, If Only, Hooked on You, Take a Stand, Just One Night, another instrumental, Play with the Fire, Don't Love Anybody But Me, and In the Middle of the Night. Okay, the album starts off really good. Those first couple tunes are really, really great. It just gets really kind of commercial and poppy. You can tell we're in the mid-'80s now, so you can kind of understand what's going on in popular music. And so a lot of the heavier bands are trying to be a little bit more commercial. So for me, a decent album, a handful of really good songs, the rest, okay, right? So then we're going to fast forward. So we're at 1987 for the Surveillance album. Out of all these albums, probably one of my least favorites. Again, a couple good tracks, right? So we've got Never Say Never, good song, all right, pretty good song. Headed for Nowhere, All the King's Horses, which has guest guitar solos from Steve Morse at the time from the Dixie Dregs, and I believe he had just joined Kansas at the time. Carry on the Flame, Let the Light Shine on Me, Long Time Gone, Rock You Down, another little instrumental thing, On, All Over Again, and Running in the Night. So obviously most of those songs are, you list the titles and they don't really ring a bell with most people because this really began that kind of slide. In fact, this album, barely dented the top 30 for the band and was just not a really, really big seller compared to a lot of the ones that came before it. So at this, this point in time, the band were starting to see, some of the cracks, and they would kind of go dormant for a little while. Rick Emmett would eventually leave the band. And they would, the Triumph camp was pretty silent for a number of years. It wasn't until the early 80s that the band came out with another album. They regrouped without Emmett. Okay, they got Phil X in on guitar, at the time fairly unknown. Phil has since played with John Bon Jovi. If you look on YouTube, he does all sorts of guitar videos for various music sites and music stores. He's a funny guy. He's got a lot of personality, but in 1993, not really that well known. So they did the Edge of Excess album, which kind of came and went without a whimper. I'll be honest with you, I've never heard the album. Don't own it. If you can even find it now, I don't know. I don't know anything about it. But obviously, it kind of sank without a trace. So that goes to tell you everything about it right there. So at this point in time, the band breaks up again, and most people think Triumph is done forever, right? Well, I do want to mention that they did release some other albums, okay, mostly live albums. So in '85, we had the Excellent Stages album, which basically had most of their greatest tunes and most of the road repertoire that they had played up to that point. A very, very strong live album, one of the better ones from the 80s. But then a couple of years back, what was this, in 2012, I believe it was, the original band gets together and does a set at Sweden Rock, okay? And this is the live album that came out of it, and basically they played kind of what you expect. So they played When the Lights Go Down, Laid on the Line, Allied Forces, Never Surrender, I Live for the Weekend, Blinding Light Show / Moonchild, Rocky Mountain Way, Magic Power, Rock and Roll Machine, and Fight the Good Fight. Okay? Can't go wrong with that set list, right? Most fans kind of salivated at this. For the many of us who didn't make it over to Sweden Rock that year, we were able to see this, listen to it, and see it on DVD. And we're hoping that the band would kind of parlay that with another studio album and get together and maybe tour. It hasn't happened as of yet. I kind of think that ship has already sailed. Would I love to see it? Sure. But I don't think that's going to happen. But at least we got this as a kind of last hurrah. But a lot of great music the band has left together. You know, not a enormous discography when you really look at it. It's really not a lot, but some really, really great music as from a band who will probably always be remembered maybe as the #2 most popular hard rock / metal band out of Canada behind Rush. But quite a different band, and they've left behind a really good legacy of music with a really good, like, kind of like 4 or 5 album run. That's you know, next to untouchable. So anyway, that's my kind of artist retrospective history of today. The band Triumph from Canada. I am Pete Pardo from Sea Tranquility. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on the mighty YouTube. We've got some new product shows coming up over the next couple days. I got a bunch of things that come in that I want to talk to you about, but look out for this weekend. We have got a history of / retrospective of the band Black Sabbath. It's going to be epic. So we'll see you then. Take care. Bye-bye.